Treasure Seekers. This is Blake coming to you live from New Mexico, and joining me as always from Washington State, it's Bryn and Cody. How's it going, guys?
Good evening. Had a lovely weekend. I have to quickly report that I think I've had my largest treasure hunting breakthrough thus far.
Oh,
I was
wow.
working on some Pokemon box stuff last night, and I was on a roll, stayed up too late. It was probably like midnight, and I texted our group what I was finding, and I got a response back from Blake immediately, who is also have to mention 1 hour ahead of us.
Yeah.
So that is my largest breakthrough so far. That I just have to text all my findings in the middle of the night, and then I get quick responses.
Yes, I was also working on the Pokemon chapter at the time, so the timing is good, and I
Yes.
sent you back some good intel as well, I think, right?
Yes, it was excellent.
Okay, good.
I was so thrilled to have someone a captured audience in real time. But no, we've had a good weekend. Excellent weekend.
Good, good.
I think you two are going to be far too sleep deprived to hunt effectively.
No.
Sleep when you're dead.
Sleeping's not going to find the treasure, Cody.
I'm a big team go to bed early.
Yeah, and that's how you don't find the box.
Yeah. How many times have you woken up with an epiphany at night like Bryn has?
Exactly. How are you, Blake? How was your weekend?
Good, good. Played a new board game today, so that took like 6 hours. So I was a little
Which
bit
one?
later than I thought. It's called I say hegemony, but I don't think that's the correct pronunciation. Homogeny, maybe hegemony.
Wait, it took 6 hours because you were learning how to do it, or it was just a very long game?
Both. Yeah, we
Is it-
had all watched a watch it played video, like a tutorial, and it still took us like 6 hours. Let's see. Started at 1 o'clock, and then went till about 7. Yeah, so it was about 6 hours, but it was a very satisfying game. I did not win. I got third place.
I would say that's too long.
Yeah, could be for some people. We don't mind.
Yes. Good. I'm glad it was a success.
Yes, very much. All right, should we dive into There's Treasure Inside content for today?
Yes, please.
Let's start with news. Bryn, you have news today. What's it about?
Just a little bit of news. So we got a new Jon Collins-Black email in our inboxes. It was just a quick Father's Day reminder that his books were on sale. But the part that was interesting is that it sounds like maybe Jon Collins-Black is also getting back into the treasure hunting game himself.
Yeah.
So at the end of the email, he mentions, I'm considering doing a little treasure hunting this summer myself for the first time in a few years. Who knows? Maybe our paths will cross somewhere out in Mother Nature's realm. So I guess I'm just kind of curious which hunt he's doing. I mean, do we think he's maybe doing Justin's hunt? I guess there's so many other little smaller hunts out there too that he could be doing. So it's interesting that now that he has his book out in the wilds, the last 5 years he's been building the puzzles, and now he's kind of getting back into the other side. So I don't know, just fun to think about that he's switching roles for a little bit here.
Yeah, I think that's super cool. I would, my first blush at that is that it is Justin's hunt, maybe. The Beyond the Map's Edge treasure hunt would be my guess. It seems like a lot of Forest Fen hunters have gravitated towards Beyond the Map's Edge for a number of reasons. But yeah, that'd be my first guess too. But could be other ones too. You know, is there currently a treasure fix hunt that is a boots on the ground one? Cody, do you know? Or is that an
Not that I know
armchair?
if it's boots on the ground.
Okay.
I know they had that like American bison hunt.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's what they call a armchair hunt.
It is an armchair
I
hunt.
think.
Okay.
Don't quote me on it 100%, but I think it's
Okay.
mostly, if not all, an armchair hunt.
Okay. But yeah, that's super cool. Maybe he's looking for The Secret. Have you guys heard of The Secret?
Mm-mm.
I've heard of it, but I
Yeah,
don't
I've
have
heard
any
of it, but I don't know
details.
the details about it.
Okay. yeah, at some point we'll have to do a little recap of some of these other treasure hunts and puzzles that are widely known or not so widely known, but save that for another day. Maybe after a box has been found. We'll see.
Ooh.
I've got kind of a news-ish type thing. I was
Okay.
trying to think of where to plug this in, kind of in the way our episodes go.
In our programming.
In our programming. Maybe it goes here. So we had talked a handful of times previously about how like the term the lion's share was kind of made up by the community and wasn't in any of the actual like publications. I don't know if anyone's brought this up yet, but I noticed when I was flipping through some stuff this week doing some research that the cover of my Apple book says
Yes.
the lion's share on it.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you guys knew that?
We did. Yeah, that's been one of the arguments the argument that's been made towards why the lion's share is kind of an official term, but I still argue that is just happenstance, and JCB took it for convenience when the ebooks came out.
That makes sense, yeah, because they definitely look like they just kind of like typed over the normal cover.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say hastily, but definitely like after the fact when they went to publish the ebooks. So
Yes, sorry,
right. Yeah,
sorry to be a wet blanket, Cody. Yes,
no, it's not a wet
Saul.
blanket. I'm not surprised that you guys knew. I just want to make sure that everyone knew in case anyone missed it, because I had missed it until earlier this week.
Yes.
When you're up until midnight, these are the details that really come into focus.
These are the things I slept through.
Exactly.
But yeah, yes, we don't need to reopen that discussion right now, I don't think, but it's a good find, and yes, the main argument against some of the things I've said before. All right, that was a good spot to put that programming, though, Cody. Well done.
Oh, thank you.
Anything else you want to say about that email, or should we dive into horseshoes and hand grenades, which is going to be yours, Cody? Just a heads up.
Hopefully it's not something you guys already talked about while I was sleeping.
All right, horseshoes and hand grenades. Cody.
All right. Also, I should say, I don't know why. I feel like the tone of this is I'm the bad guy for going to bed at a normal hour, and you guys stayed up late. And now
we're just picking on you.
We're being responsible and
shame
finding
on
treasure.
you guys for staying up too late.
Yes, good.
I did
good table turn.
Yes, I want that documented before we move on. All right, so I've got a. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say how the turntables. That's all.
Okay, I'm glad that we. All right. Here's what I got for you. I was once again looking at kind of potential solves from the perspective of what are some things that I would do if I were the author and I was putting together the hunt. That's kind of a common place where I start a lot of kind of my where I diagnose what threads to pull. So one thing that I thought, and this is probably totally a me thing and not necessarily like definitely something he'd do, but I know if it was me and I wrote a whole book, I'd want like the last sentence of the book to be like, to be important. I think it just, to me personally, I think it feels weird to like write a whole book and be dropping hints everywhere and then just kind of fizzle out at the end and have filler text at the end. I would want that last text to like have some weight to it, that last sentence. So I actually had that thought before I reread the last sentence, but I went back to reread it, and it was good because it's also one that I believe was like a unanimous FFPN when we did our chapter 23 episode.
Mm-hmm.
So that last sentence was, if you and I and the people around us choose to groove to the heartbeats of all of our collective hunts, it will surely be the most beautiful song we ever know. That's the last sentence at the end of chapter 23, which is the last chapter of 21, or last chapter of part 1, which is the lion's share. So the part of that that jumped out to me for a number of reasons, and this may be kind of reiterating some stuff that we talked about in the chapter 23 episode, but the big word for me was groove. That one kind of felt out of place. We talked about how groove kind of feels a little out of place for kind of the feel of some of his other writing style and word choices in part one, when he says we choose to groove to the heartbeats. So the thing that made me think of as I was thinking of kind of about the word groove is an old Mythbusters episode that I watched probably 10 or 15 years ago. And at no point between having that thought and talking about it right now have I actually gone back to like reference the Mythbusters episode. So I'm going to talk about my memory of it.
Okay.
Take it with a huge grain of salt because I was probably like, I was 15 years younger. But the gist of it, no matter what, is whatever the details of the episode were, the gist of it is correct. I know that. So in the episode, they were talking about the myth of it had to do with like in ancient times, people spinning pottery, like clay pottery, and like I can't remember if it was like a piece of straw or something, or something getting in the way of the pottery as it spun. And the myth was that they would talk, and like the piece of straw would make grooves in the clay as it was spinning, and that you could get those grooves, get those like the ancient clay pot with the grooves in it and play it back like a record and like hear talking from like ancient times. Because like ultimately that's pretty much how a record works, right? Is you've got like, oh gosh, I just talked to myself into having explained records. I don't really know, but you know, they're making grooves either left to right or up and down, with something creating a groover, and then playing it back and making the thing vibrate like the inside of your eardrum. We all know how it works. I don't need to explain it to everybody.
Honestly, I'm pretty impressed with the words that have come out of your mouth so far. So
All right,
I say
excellent.
quit while you're ahead and move on.
Yes, that's how a record obviously works. That's all the details anyone needs. So that's what I was thinking about. And I thought, okay, what's like I thought that might be like kind of a cool idea that JCB could be playing off of, is like old, there's obviously the music themes, like maybe old earliest music or earliest recordings. So I looked into that and I found basically the oldest recording of a human voice, which actually I think in like the early 2000s was like it was recorded and wasn't ever able to be played back. But then in like the early 2000s, a group of researchers found it and found a way to play it back ultimately. And so now it's known as like the earliest recording of a human voice that's ever been played back. So the exact excerpt on it was the very first known recording of a musical sound with grooves was the 1816 recording of Au clair de la lune, a traditional French folk song. So that immediately kind of rings some bells for me, because obviously we've got a lot of French connections in the book that we've talked about. And then the idea of it being a folk song was very reminiscent of like some of those like fairy tale type things that we had found in the text of the chapter. So I got a little bit interested in that. And this recording was made by Edouard Leon Scott de Martinville, using his invention, the phonautograph. The phonautograph. In reading some different articles on this guy, they keep referencing him as Scott, like that's like the main single name they use. Like, I'm not sure how the full name works, but like when they use the one word, like you'd kind of use someone's last name, they keep calling him Scott. I thought that the fact that they did that was also notable, and I'm going to actually come back and talk about why I thought that was notable here in a second. So some things about this earliest known musical groove recording that I thought were interesting. The name of the song translates to "By the Light of the Moon," which obviously moon stuff, celestial stuff in general. I thought that was kind of a neat little connection there. Part of one of the articles said it's a simple melody, and it's commonly taught to beginners learning an instrument. So I don't know if there could possibly be like a leitmotif connection there, since if it's one of those kind of Mary Had a Little Lamb style,
right?
Little children's folk song type thing. It's from a children's book. I thought that was interesting, being that, Jon Collins-Black owns a publishing company that publishes children's books and has written children's books. And then the other one that had jumped out to me that I wanted to come back to was this guy's name being Scott. made me think of the first chapter, where's the picture of Scotty from Star Trek, and they say um, not to be confused with Scotty from Star Trek. Now you may say, "Come on, Cody, that's a stretch. This is chapter 23 we're talking about at the very end, and the Scotty was from chapter 1." But I was researching this at the same time as I was looking into something else, which is the idea that chapter 1 starts on page 19 and the end of part 1 is page 198, I believe. And then that missing page 90 in the middle is like the exact middle between that start and finish. So it's kind of got me thinking about like potential like a palindromic structure where like the beginning of the book and the end of the book either is some sort of like palindrome or some sort of like mirror image, which I guess kind of is pretty synonymous with palindrome. But I was kind of exploring the idea separately at this time that like chapter 1 and chapter 23 could go together, and chapter 2 and chapter 22 because of that weird page 90 structure being like exactly halfway through. So since I already had that in mind before getting to this part of my research, when they started calling him Scott, it immediately made me think of the chapter 1 Scotty connection. So, I mean, ultimately, I should say this is going to be a horseshoes and hand grenades. So none of this I really believe is like correct or spot on, but it's quite a few interesting connections. So what this all ultimately led me to, that I spent most of my time actually researching, was, I don't know if you guys are familiar with like the artwork stuff that kind of came up within like the last 10 years, where you get like physical artwork on your wall of like heartbeats or like sound waves from like your favorite sounds, or like audio clips where they like show the actual waveforms from the audio, like physically represented on like a poster, like out of wood or something.
Or you've seen the ones where like they represent a movie by like the color schema that's used every minute or something. I've seen ones like that too. And that really reminded me, I'm derailing us a bit, but that really reminded me of that little pattern that's on the bottom of Greninja's foot in the Pokemon chapter 2. So have a second look at that, and yeah, look up the movie post or the movie art representations as well that are in the same vein of exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'll have to look at that. That seems very related. So between that and then also kind of going back to the last sentence that I read earlier, where he says, if you and I and the people around us choose to groove to the heartbeats of our collective hunts. So that really made me think of like groove, heartbeat, those kind of physical representations of, you know, heartbeats or songs or those things that kind of seem to have come up like right in the right time frame, like a handful of years before he started working on this book. So I thought, is there a way for me to basically reverse this whole idea that I've been exploring here and get some sort of data out of the book that then can like be converted into like, I guess, a wave file or some sort of data that can be read as like audio instead of text data. So I did like quite a bit of research on that, and it's going to be a real short part of my story because it's like ultimately it seems way too complex to me. So if anyone maybe knows more or knows of like a simpler way to do it, it just seems like you'd need a ton of data to get anything like significant, and like you'd have to come up with instructions on exactly what data to get where, and then it seems like it's not even really like a super available program that you'd use to convert that data into audio. It would be like a very niche thing. So I really like the idea. It felt on brand if it was easier to do, but in researching it became like evident that it was going to be a very difficult thing to do. The only other thing I wanted to mention is that there was a second recording that I was looking into, by Thomas Mason in 1878. And it is the oldest known playable sound recording of an American voice and the first musical performance captured on phonograph. And that one was notable because it is known as the St. Louis tinfoil, because it was a recording done in one of the St. Louis, I did this last episode, but I didn't write down what it was, but one of like the significant buildings in St. Louis. Some art museum or something, St. Louis something. But obviously, we've talked pretty extensively about different theories after the St. Louis. I know that that's an area that a lot of people are honed in on. So that could possibly be more evidence towards St. Louis for those people, or more threads to pull.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's cool.
Good work. Even if you don't have a nice audio file or visual that we can look at as of this time.
I mean, I feel like even if what you ultimately felt like you got to a dead end, but it seems like there's maybe other like points in what you were working through that you kind of like
look more into some of the specific nodes in my timeline of
break off some other directions and try to build off of that from there. So yeah, I think that's very clever.
Yeah, I did not realize the page 90 was right in the middle of the part 1. That's new information that I had missed before. So that does make it very interesting, especially because chapter 9 is talking about the mirrors and the Chavin de Juntar temple. And yeah, that's right at the middle. And Scotty, some debate on whether that's a mirror image or not. So interesting that I will keep that in mind as I go through the part 1 again to see if there's connections between chapters as they come closer together.
I think of everything I looked into this week. Sorry, I kind of cut you off there.
Oh no, that's fine.
I was just gonna say, I think of everything I looked into this week, kind of the one I felt I was most interested by was that page 90 being right in the middle. And I feel like it's something, I bet so many people have known that for so long, and it just never occurred to me. It's also just, it was hard to come up with a full segment on just that, but I feel like it does kind of deserve its own segment once we've all had time to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I was thinking about with that page 90 being exactly in the middle is if you can create kind of 2 sections, like the pre-page 90 and the post-page 90, they're equal in length, and found a way to kind of maybe get your weave them together, use some of that theory.
Nice.
So that's something that's kind of on my agenda here to look into, is possibly having that break point so that you can weave things together in some way, whether that be by sentence or page or something like that.
Interesting.
I'd be curious at taking a look at the page backgrounds, how they correspond in the part. I don't want to say part 1 and part 2, like the pre-90, post-90. See if there's any page background connections that could help make sense that way, since those have been a little mysterious.
Cool. Great. Should we dive into the mailbag?
Mailbag. We've got mail.
All right. 2 mailbags today. I am going to hijack the last one, but that's okay. First mailbag is from Ilene. She said, I watched all your podcasts. I'm not sure if the book jacket was covered. Yes, we all know about the hidden non-haiku, but what about breaking down the wordage on the back of the jacket? Part of the wordage is repeated in the intro. Any thoughts on that? I thought glean was an interesting word. Ilene. So I don't know if you guys have your back of the book jackets handy. I can just read it loud.
Ready.
It's very short. There's just one quote on the back followed by a small summary. So the quote is from Jon Collins-Black. I've hidden a treasure somewhere in the United States that's worth millions of dollars, and it's waiting for you to find it. Jon Collins-Black. Comprised of pounds of gold, precious metals, and rare gems, along with over 65 one-of-a-kind objects owned or created by the likes of Picasso, Carnegie, Washington, Tiffany, Thoreau, Onassis. This treasure stands alone. Read the stories of the fascinating rare items that make up this treasure, glean from them to discover where these riches are located. The culmination of almost 5 years' work, this extensive treasure hunt led by its creator to learn much more than he expected. Find out what inspired him, uncover what he realized, share the joy he found along the way. Then if you wish, follow the clues to find the incredible treasures showcased in this book. So I thought it was a good suggestion from Ilene to revisit that, because yes, certainly there was, when I think the second printing of books came about, if people had a damaged book cover, the publishing company was replacing those. And so, first blush at that is like, yeah, so that you have access to the haiku that's on the back flap of the book jacket. But I think Ilene brings up a good point that maybe we should also be looking at the back text as well, as maybe a reason why he also included replacements for damaged book covers.
Yeah, I can't say. I'm sure I read the back cover at some point. I certainly was not familiar with what it said at this point in time. So yeah, I think rereading that is super interesting, especially now that we've read the whole book.
Mm-hmm.
I agree that glean feels like an interesting word choice. I mean, it does seem appropriate, so maybe there's not much more to unpack there. Yeah, I guess at first pass, nothing like obviously stands out, but I wouldn't expect it to. So I'm trying to think through different ways that this could potentially have a little nugget or two hidden in it.
Right. Yeah, the first thing I did when I looked at this again, based on Ilene's suggestion, was the names that are listed: Picasso, Carnegie, Washington, Tiffany, Thoreau, Onassis, to see if you could make a little anagram out of those first names of the letters. And I didn't come up with anything that was too convincing, unfortunately, because there's only an O for the vowel.
Yeah.
So anyway, I tried some iterations of like using multiple of each letter if possible, but yeah, nothing great out of that. So I did a little bit of a poke at that, but nothing to report back, unfortunately.
I like the share the joy he found along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Just more joy, so much joy. I got a whole pile of joy in this book. I just know that when all is said and done, that there's something about the joy that's going to be a significant portion of the solve.
Yes. Uncover what he realized.
Yeah, those three short sentences are probably what seemed the most curious. Mm-hmm. Find out what inspired him. Uncover what he realized. Share the joy he found along the way.
So anyway,
intriguing.
I thought it was a good little thought exercise and wanted to share that with the rest of the audience because I thought it was a great idea. So
I think my favorite part of that is it's just a reminder that the whole book is in play.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's made it very clear that clues can be hidden anywhere. So I guess I'm almost embarrassed that I'm not more familiar with that copy on the back because it's literally on one of the covers of the book. And I haven't given it too much thought. So it's a good reminder that even outside of like the chapters, there's a lot of content.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even on like the copyright page, we have that weird symbol still. There's just so much hidden throughout this book that I'm sure we haven't even noticed yet.
Right. A lot to dig into. All right, second email is from Daniel. It says, "Hey Bryn, it's to you.
Oh, nice.
I couldn't find anything with this attempted solve, but I'm not convinced it's useless, so I wanted to see if you might get anything from it. I'm moving on to other possibilities, so feel free to share it. If it leads anywhere, I'd love to hear what you found. I started down this path because I noticed the image uses a magenta filter. These filter out green light in favor of red and blue light. I thought this was striking because Pokemon first released as red and green in Japan. Then they filtered out green in favor of Pokemon red and blue for the international release, only to return to Pokemon leaf green, which is like a later iteration of the Pokemon games. So I thought, hey, let's play with Photoshop. I wanted to include high quality images, so they couldn't fit in this email. He has some images. They aren't highest quality, but they are still higher than the ones I'll show after, so apologies in advance. Also, I look closer. So actually, why don't we start with that and look at the image that he put the green filter over. So let me pull that up just for your guys' awareness here. So this is the green filter he put over the Pokemon image at the end of the Pokemon box chapter. I guess just first things to notice are like, it certainly looks like the Charizard here is more pronounced, I would say, as well as potentially the sorry, Cody, what's the second? Charmeleon, thank you. I don't have my cheat sheet up, so you'll see my cheat sheet in a second. But anyway, this was the idea Daniel submitted as modifying the image with some photo manipulation here.
Yeah, the contrast in general is a really interesting aspect of that. Really emphasizes different things.
Right. So I did something similar actually that I wanted to show next. So I'm going to take this down and share mine. So I again apologize. I'll try to get clear images. I just want to get the gist across here. I used an app called Animal Vision that's on iOS it's a very simple app. It has to use your camera on your phone, but it modifies whatever you're looking at through augmented reality, which I thought was probably pretty fair game for this box because he talks a lot about Pokemon Go. It modifies what you're looking at to show you the perspective of how different animals would see it. So in this case, we're looking at a bird's vision. That's probably less interesting. It kind of makes everything more magenta and pinkish. And I, again, apologize that it's out of focus here. It's just from my camera, and I had to take a screenshot because it doesn't actually use the photography feature of your phone. A cat. And I think that this is pretty interesting because it really shows, I think, fairly clearly where the manipulation on the photo in the back of the Pokemon box has some very clear borders. So it's really showing the contrast between, this purple and cyan, I would say, where kind of those weird pixelations are happening in the unmanipulated Pokemon box. I think it highlights much clearer where that contrast was added. And then there's a dog, which is more just black and white, I would say. This is just a fish, which almost looks identical to the original, except it's a fisheye. And then there's a mouse, which again shows what looks like to me highlighting the contrast of where Jon Collins-Black potentially manipulated that image and added some photo effects to it. Here in the purple and the yellow. And then rabbit, which looks very similar to the rabbit. Looks very similar to,
the cat?
The cat, yeah, exactly. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. It's certainly shows, I think, where the manipulations are happening when he added some effects to this image. Any thoughts on that between my investigation and Daniel's here?
I love it. Everybody knows that I'm a fan of continuing to try to dissect this image in every possible way. And I think I like this so much because it feels very logical to me. Like there's a reason for doing the things that you're doing. It's not just like doing something that doesn't make sense with the story. And I mean, like with the mouse and the cat, I feel like since you can see more of those different areas of how various parts of the image were manipulated, that kind of feels like we're on the right track, even if it's not exactly what we're supposed to be doing. I think it feels like a big step in the right direction.
Yeah, as mentioned, just because there's Pokemon Go mentioned the chapter, I feel like it's very fair game to either do photo manipulation or, as I was doing, using an app even to like change what that image looked like. Like that seems very in play to me for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, he literally says people are looking through their phones in the chapter.
Mm-hmm.
I have mixed feelings.
Okay.
I think on one hand, I very much agree that it seems very on theme. And it also feels like there's like specific ties that you guys both just mentioned of like looking through your phone and augmented reality and that kind of stuff. I think those are all big pros in favor of kind of this idea. The thing that keeps going through my mind that I'm a little worried about is using this kind of third party software. And it's also just like not super black and white, where it's like, I feel like if you got 5 different apps that showed you what a picture looks like through a bird's view, all 5 of them would probably show something slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you, I don't know, maybe there's a way to create, if you're JCB, there's a way to create that image where you just are confident that it's always going to look the way you want it to look through the vast majority of third-party apps. But it kind of seems like, I don't know that we know enough about how birds vision work that every developer is going to always create, something that's going to give you the same output for the same input. So that's something that I'm a little hesitant about. But other than that, I agree that it seems very on theme. And I would even be convinced, my gut reaction is always to go back to he said all you need is the book and a pair of shoes. But I wouldn't even bring that up in this case just because it seems so on theme that I think that being this on theme kind of trumps that statement by him.
I would argue that I think actually looking through your phone to see the image in that way is maybe not necessarily what we have to be doing. I would argue that I think it's the concept of the animal vision is what we're supposed to be getting at. So maybe we're not even necessarily having to look at it through the app, but by doing so, maybe we're kind of getting a better idea of the intention of what he's actually wanting us to find out. So I guess I'm not saying like I necessarily think something is supposed to be revealed by looking at it through an animal vision app, but rather thinking about how an animal sees is more relevant to the chapter.
So you'd say this would be basically on par with if you like did a Google image search for like, show me what cats see. And it like all of the images look just like stylistically very similar to this image. That's kind of what you're thinking.
Yeah. It'd be like
more
if
than
the
something
intent
actually gets revealed.
Right. If the intent is we're supposed to be like, oh, this image is supposed to be like an animal would view it in black and white. Like if black and white is what we're supposed to come away with, I think you could either find that out through this app, or if you were to Google how does this animal see and it happens to be black and white, you would still get to the same answer.
I could buy that.
All right, second part of the email from Daniel. Also, as I look closer at the commonly accepted Mewtwo, I really don't think it's a Mewtwo. So, Cody approach here. Be skeptical. Its face and body are too similar to JCB's image of a Greninja, except its tail. But we'll circle back to that. Mewtwo has wide hips, much rounder face, and different hands. The only similarities between a Mewtwo and this hidden Pokemon are their stature and tail. That brings us back to a Greninja with a tail. Why would I think this is a Greninja with a tail? I don't. I think Blake was on the right track. And this is a Mew. Oh no, I don't know if I think it's a Mewtwo, I think. Closely to its upper left is possibly the face of another hidden Mew in what I interpret as rocks. Perhaps that could be Mewtwo connection, since there could be 2 Mews. Mewtwo. Do these nuances matter? Was I on the right track with the RGB colors? I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. All right, some more controversial statement that the Mewtwo that's in that picture is not a Mewtwo. Maybe this is an opportunity to use the new Blake Rant music.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
No, I've been waiting for it.
Oh, you're gonna have to wait another day. It's broken for some reason. Sorry, I didn't check it ahead of time. Anyway, so I do think that is a Mewtwo. Let me pull up some visuals here for everybody to look at. And this is kind of towards Cody as well, because he is skeptical that there are other images of Pokemon in here. So this is what I have labeled as the Pokemon I see in this image. So the Mewtwo here, which is the most high resolution part. I think we can zoom in on this a bit and just have a closer look. Anyway, I know stylistically it's not a perfect representation of a Mewtwo, but that's...
I want to pause since you are zoomed in on that.
Yeah.
Since you said it resembles the Greninja. And I will say, I guess I'm not sold on it being the Greninja, primarily because of the tail. However, there are some weird similarities once he pointed that out. So like the ears, the very pointy ears, are very similar to the Greninja.
Mm-hmm.
Those eyes, the shape of the eyes,
mm-hmm.
the creepy, bony, pointy fingers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, kind of just like the little narrow waist and there are a lot of similarities to the Greninja in the book. Mm-hmm. I will say that.
But we already know if the Greninja was generated with AI, it's not going to be perfect because the speculation is he's trying to generate something that's not a copyright infringement directly on.
Right. I'm just saying that his artistic interpretation of the Greninja is kind of oddly similar to the artistic representation of the Mewtwo. That's all I'm saying.
I agree with that, and I don't think I'd consider that before, so I will also be in your camp on that, Bryn.
I just want to reiterate almost exactly what Blake just said, because it's the first thing that popped into my head, and I think it bears repeating, that he's trying to use unlicensed or not he's trying not to use licensed images. So anything that he's going to put in the book is going to not look exactly like it's supposed to, or any representations of Pokemon are not going to look exactly like they're supposed to. I don't think that you could get any more Mewtwo-esque than he currently has without it being kind of infringing on the licensing.
Correct. I'm not arguing
with
just
you.
Saying
they
share
the initial
some pretty okay
of it not being a Mewtwo. I think that it is closer to a Mewtwo than anything else by a wide margin. But I agree with you, Bryn, that I think that there's room there for him to be changing specific things on the Mewtwo to draw attention to it, or maybe there's more to specific elements of the Mewtwo that he's altering. But to say that it's, even if you were to tell me I don't think it's actually a Mewtwo, I could buy that potentially, but I don't think I'm going to buy that it's a different Pokemon than a Mewtwo.
Okay.
What if that tail is actually the Greninja tongue?
Right. Yes. That is.
Anyways,
interest.
I'm just making people mad now. Carry on.
I mean, certainly this hand is not like a Mewtwo.
Exactly.
Hand.
Yeah.
The hand, as Daniel called out, like that's true. But I think it's important for the next part of what I think the interpretation is. So I have my other Pokemon shown here that I think appear in this image, which Cody is skeptical of. I think that this is a Charmander up here. I think this is a Charmeleon, and I think this is a Charizard. And I have the reason I think that, I have the Pokemon shown here. The Charmander certainly has like no horn on the head, right? Up here. The Charmeleon has a single horn, which is very distinct here. And the Charizard has two horns, which I think is very clear in this picture as well. Which is why I've interpreted this way. And my simple interpretation of this image is You find the Mewtwo. It's very simple. You find the Mewtwo in this image and see what it's pointing at. It's pointing at the second evolution, or sorry, the first evolution of Charmander. So it goes Charmander, Charmeleon, Charizard. And for some reason, the importance of the second or first evolution, the middle evolution here, is what the clue is supposed to be, I think. I mean, there's speculation of why it goes straight from Froakie in the Pokemon chapter to the Greninja, which it goes from, the initial Froakie to the second evolution. It skips the Frogadier entirely. Why is that? And I think this is a clue that says Jon Collins-Black is saying, let's focus on that first evolution. And then he's painting a picture for us directly here. So I think there's more to the Frogadier, maybe, that's important to this chapter. And I haven't made any connections beyond that, but that's what I think this image means. I think it's a fairly simple solve.
Not to mention, we have all the half references and middle references, which would very much align with like that first evolution, the evolution between the first and the third. I like it.
Cody, you're still not convinced, or do you like this interpretation?
I mean, even the fact that Mewtwo is called Mewtwo. Sorry.
I mean, I don't know. In a vacuum, you're showing me this, I'm thinking Rorschach test, and I'm still kind of staying in that camp right now. The idea that he is like some of the things we just talked about, like his hand being way more defined than a real Mewtwo hand, and that being like one of the features. Like obviously the reason for doing that would be so that he can point like very decisively. And then he would definitely be pointing at what you're calling the Charmeleon. And the fact that that ties in like so blatantly with the idea that he totally skipped Frogadier in any of the text. That all seems notable. I still have just such a tough time with calling these Pokemon bases.
Right. So I'm going to use your quote and say if you took it in a vacuum and I saw, the Charmander head only, I'd be a bit more skeptical. But in my mind, it's very clear that he's showing all three of the Charmander, Charmeleon, Charizard evolution 1, 2, 3 in this image. So taken together, I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it shows that there's intent.
Yeah, I think I'm barely in the camp still of no. But you're definitely building a case that's like got me way closer to convinced than I have ever been previously.
Thanks.
Also, I think you have, 2 Froakies labeled there. I guess I see 3 frogs, so there would be a middle frog as well.
Right here, a Frogadier.
Yeah, that would be a Frogadier.
But yeah,
you're drawing me in, and you guys are trying to push me away again.
Then maybe a second one, third one. Yeah.
Saying if there's also 3, that means there would be a middle one. I don't think that's getting too off the rails.
Yeah, the ones that are less convincing certainly are the Totodile, which I think is still kind of interesting. I just don't know what to do with it. And the Swana right here. That looks like a swan's head to me, but I don't have additional context with those. So those I'm certainly would be more receptive to Cody's skepticism that that's more of a Rorschach test. But anyway, I really think right now in my mind the clue is simple. You found the Mewtwo in the image. What's it pointing to? Well, it's pointing to that first evolution of a Pokemon. Maybe that's as simple as it is. So that's my mindset right now. That can always change, but that's what I'm using moving forward at this point.
There was this old riddle. It was one of those riddles where they said like it was advertised as like 99% of PhD professors get this wrong, but 99% of kindergartners get this right. And it was like a sketch of a bus, and it said it's just like a static bus on a road, And it was like, kind of goes back to my palindrome or mirror thing. it was mirrored, right? So it had like a front and rear windshield and like some windows on it, and it was like an exact mirror image, one side to the other side. And the question was just like, what direction is this bus moving? And then the idea, and I think this is all fake news, but the idea was, oh, none of the professors could figure it out, but then all the kids knew it had to be going this direction because there's no door on it, so the door must be on the other side. Uh, that is what I was thinking of as you were talking about this being potentially like simpler than you would think, and that like maybe those are the Pokemon faces. And I know, in the text of the book, JCB talked about wanting to, involve a wide range of people with different interests, and he has kids and writes children's books. And I think if you were going to make like some very simple, like, hey, what would a kid see in this picture? If you're going to do that kind of clue in one of the 5 treasure boxes, the one that would make sense to do it on is probably the Pokemon box.
Right.
So I think that may be another piece of evidence towards the idea of like, hey, we're going to make these little like Rorschach images that a child would see and be like, hey, that's Charmander, that's Charizard kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then just have the Mewtwo point to it. Feels a little bit maybe on brand for like bringing in all ages and different interests and have something in there for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. There's me
I feel
trying to help
slightly personally attacked by how simplified you're making my purple image.
Maybe the whole Pokemon box is just so easy it's for kids.
What if it is a child solve and I'm just
Then
losing sleep over it?
then that would make you like on par with a PhD professor who
Thank you.
can't figure
That
out
makes
which
me
way
feel
the bus
better.
is traveling.
All right.
It all goes back to us not knowing how to I mean, even if we had another box solved, we don't know that this would be equally as difficult or
Right.
But anyway, for not being willing to commit to the whole idea, I sure am offering you a lot of evidence.
Yeah, we're reeling you in. All right, and
You're
that was an email from Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks to Daniel and Ilene for those nice mailbags today. Okay, let's move on. Shall we go to Discord Detectives? Bryn, you're in charge.
This Discord Detectives is brought to you by There's Treasure Inside Reddit. So I found this post from just a few days ago. It was from M777Z. And this post claims that they found that the 5 longest national scenic trails line up with potential box locations. So if you just want to pull up the picture that I sent you, Blake, it's probably a good visual as I talk through this. I guess my first question was, well, what is a national scenic trail? So a national scenic trail, there's 11 in the United States. The 11 national scenic trails were established to provide outdoor recreation opportunities and to conserve portions of the natural landscape with significant scenic, natural, cultural, or historic importance. So these 11 trails all feel, I mean, at first pass, like, okay, that could be prime location for JCB to be hiding treasure in these locations. So to walk through what M777Z was saying as far as which trails would line up with which box. So we obviously have the Appalachian Trail, which would be for the Appalachian Footpath. We have the Continental Divide Trail, which aligns with the Forest Fen states. They mentioned that in the Forest Fen hunt, the Continental Divide was a popular theory for where warm waters halt. So I like that a lot. The Pacific Crest Trail obviously spans the West Coast. So this would most likely be relevant to the past and future box. It also kind of goes near Tahoe, which is, of course, a popular search location for past and future box. They admit that the weakest here is the Florida Trail. That would have to be for the Pokemon box. You can kind of see, I mean, like that trail does continue along the Gulf Coast there. So, it definitely is, I would say, in play for
Oh,
their
yeah.
road trip route from New Orleans for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And then coming in, I guess I'm not sure if these are ranked by like longest to shortest of the longest 5 here, but North County Trail, which would be for our largest treasure, the lion's share, which is in the upper Midwest area. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And I guess I wanted to get your guys' takes on this approach for potentially aligning with where the treasures are hidden, and maybe just a slightly broader discussion as well as like, do we think the box locations will hold particular importance to JCB, to United States history? Do we think that there's a common thread between the box locations as far as like location significance? Anyways, I just thought this was an interesting approach, kind of similar to what we talked about a while back with the Olympic rings theory in Olympic locations in the United States. But this is a new take on that.
What I like about this in particular is when we talked previously about kind of like common links or threads between all 5 boxes, our biggest concern was what we kept calling too big a bite, where it's like once you crack that, it just narrows down the search locations for all these different boxes too much. And this feels like it would be a cool way of linking every box where even once if this was, confirmed, it really wouldn't narrow things down too much. Obviously the Pokemon box would be narrowed down pretty significantly, but a lot of these other ones really wouldn't be much more narrowed down than like the Pokemon box is already, right? Or the Appalachian Trail one is already. So I like that idea where it feels like, it'd probably take at least, you'd think, probably 2 boxes before you're like, okay, 2 of them were found on these type of trails. There's a pretty good chance that this is like a way that he was tying them all together. And at that point, it's like you still have, if you've got the 3 on the left hand part of the screen here, you've still got 6 or 7 states, 4, 5, 6, 7 states to find these other boxes. So it kind of, I feel like this is one of the first times we've talked about something that would permeate through all 5 boxes that doesn't feel like too big a bite.
Yeah,
Sure.
I agree with that because I mean the Appalachian Footpath box, like we already have, that's the exact same information that we have already for that box. The Forest Fen box feels like it doesn't really give away too much more. So yeah, and obviously with the West Coast, certainly is not going to be like a dead giveaway of where the past and future box would be if that was the related box.
Yeah, this is super cool. Remind me the name of this. The 5.
They are called
National Scenic Trails.
National Scenic Trails.
National
So I guess there's
Scenic
11.
Trails.
So these are the 5 longest.
Okay.
So that's why it was so notable, is the 5 longest correspond seemingly with potential locations for the 5 boxes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is great. Very interesting. I like this approach. Yeah, it seemed to me, in the past interview he's done, I think with MN Jam, I think, or maybe it was actually that Daily Mail article. It sounded like he had a number of locations that he had scouted out from Google Maps. Some of the locations, if not all, he had never been to before. And so he kind of did some, rapid recon to figure out actually where he was going to hide the boxes after that. And if he used these national scenic trails as his backbone, I think that's a pretty interesting idea. So I'm not opposed to that. Something to keep in mind as boxes start to get found. Is 2 going to be enough? If the Appalachian Trail box is found on the Appalachian Trail, and let's say the past and future box is found in Tahoe, are we committed to this theory?
I mean, it certainly wouldn't be like a stamp of approval for sure, but
right.
it would be very interesting.
Cool.
And I guess if I put myself in Jon Collins-Black's shoes and you're trying to think of 5 locations to be hiding these boxes, that's incredibly overwhelming.
Mhm.
Like I would personally would want some sort of nudge to be like, okay, well, what are at least some significant locations in the United States that I can use as a starting point?
Mhm.
So this certainly feels like you'd be hitting, what did it say, like historically relevant or cultural, natural, historic significance.
Right.
Which feels pretty on brand here.
Right. Right. National Scenic Trail, NST. So let's start looking out for NST hints within the line share. Cool. I like this. Good find.
Yes. Thank you, Reddit. Thank you, M777Z.
Yes. All right. I have a quick Discord detective to tack on here. We were just talking about this a couple episodes ago about the Pokemon box again. The 5.5. 5.5. I was 5.5 years old. That's the very beginning of the Pokemon box chapter. And that seemingly was a typo or not. It was still unclear after the last interview with Jon Collins-Black by Treasure Hunt with Us. In that it looked like Jam had asked the question about 5.5, and Jon Collins-Black kind of had a response that it was a little bit unclear. Anyway, there's new information. This is from the Discord from Emma herself. Uh-oh. I don't think I have it up. Let me pull it up real quick. 1 second. Sorry. Apologies. Oops.
Bryn, quick, say something. Say something to stall.
Oh no.
No, it's fine.
Oh,
Here
no.
we go. I got it. No stall required. You guys can't see it yet, but let me share it with you. Right here. So it looks like this is a legitimate picture from the 4th or 5th printing of the book. It's still a bit unclear, but as you can see, I was 5.5 years old. It's now been corrected. I think we were discussing this a little bit earlier, Brandon. Came to the conclusion maybe it doesn't matter. But it matters to me. I always thought that was like a focal point for the chapter. Like, if you caught this typo, make sure you pay attention to 5.5, and it hadn't been corrected in the ebook. It hadn't been corrected in version 2 or 3 of the hard copies. So I thought it was important, but maybe not so much.
For me, whether it's 5.5 or 5.5, I think it's oddly specific. So either way, I think it is a clue. Especially what we said before about the middle and the halves mentioned. So I guess maybe it takes away from its clue-ness just slightly, but I guess it doesn't change any way that I would end up thinking about it and how I'm using it in my solve.
Okay.
I would also say, thinking logically how that became a typo in the first place, probably, I know, kind of Occam's razor. I would say it started as I was 5 years old, and he went back later to add the half, maybe, because he wanted it as part of a hint, and that's how it kind of ended up as a typo. Because I feel like I feel like 5 words into the first sentence is a weird place to just forget a word on your first go around. So it seems like kind of a logical way that he would have ended up with a typo there is coming back after the fact to add something in there afterwards.
Interesting. I like that idea.
Nice. See, this is why you need to stay up late and read the chapters again, so you can get more.
Literally, as we started this segment, just yawned. Just trying to hold it back.
All right. Should we do coincidence of the day and then wrap this guy up? I don't even know. There it is. Bryn, I think you have a riveting coincidence of the day.
I've heard it's the best one yet.
To be clear, we almost just didn't do coincidence of the day. And I said, no, this is better than just skipping it entirely. I was once again at a thrift shop. Everyone's going to think all I do is go to the thrift shop, but I was there. This is where all the good finds happen. I was flipping through the artwork because I kind of like to see if there's any, like, I don't know, funky artwork I can
Picassos.
find. And I'm looking for the Picassos.
Yeah, you're looking for the Da Vinci that will sell for a world record amount.
Yeah.
Anyways, there were some colors that caught my eye. Like, oh, this looks really cool, kind of maybe like early 90s ish. Pulled it out, and it was a poster, a New Orleans poster from some like New Orleans road race back in, I think it was 1988. But anyways, it was the one piece of artwork that caught my eye to pull out, and sure enough, New Orleans.
Nice. Did it have a Jayco pop-up camper?
Yeah. I have a picture of it. I should have sent you my picture.
Oh,
but no,
shoot.
I think it was pretty specific to just like generic 1980s running race material. But now I got to pull it up and look.
I feel like you've done so much research at this point that there's like everything in life is somehow a coincidence of the day.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, nice.
1989.
Crescent City Classic. I didn't know. Does that say Crescent City Classic?
Yeah.
I didn't
So
know
yeah,
New
New Orleans
was the
1989.
Crescent City. Moon.
So there we go. It ties in with the moon.
Worth it. I'm glad you shared that.
Kind of wish I bought that. It's pretty. It's back. This is back.
You don't think it's still there?
I'm sure it's still there.
So I got to go to more thrift shops. That's where I got my last coincidence of the day, right? Where I bought that little Pokemon. Oh yeah, I still have it right here. My little Pokemon
Your
binder
Rolodex
with
of
the Froakie.
Our
Somewhere here.
local Pokemon vending machine has been out of commission
Really?
for weeks now. It's been devastating.
Wow. I'm sorry to hear that.
I know.
I think it's just sold out, isn't it?
Oh, it could be.
Pokemon is all the rage right now. Jon
It
Collins-Black
is.
picked a good topic area.
That is
Crescent
for sure.
City. Crescent City can refer to New Orleans, Louisiana, due to its shape resembling a crescent when viewed from above, following the curve of the Mississippi River.
From a bird's eye view.
36,000 foot.
36,000 foot view.
Interesting. Well, maybe something to unpack there.
Yeah. This was the best coincidence of the day ever now.
Thank goodness we didn't skip it.
All right. Anything else, or should we wrap this up?
That's all from me.
All right. We're wrapping it up. Thanks for listening, everybody. We will see you next week.
Searching for clues, let's find you.